Cutter.
Present.
Escar.
Here.
Exum. Froelich.
Yes, here.
Gray. Herod. Holtorf. Hooten.
Here.
Humphrey. Jackson.
Here.
Hawkes Lewis.
Here.
Kraft-Tharp. Landgraf.
Yes, here.
McCluskey. McKean. McLaughlin.
Present.
Melton.
Here.
Michelson Janae.
Present.
Neville. Pelton. Ransom. Rich. Sandridge. Sirota.
Here.
Soper. Tipper. Tatone.
Here.
Williams. Wilson.
I believe we have a sufficient number to raise the call. Representative Benavides.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask that the call be raised.
It's been moved that the call be raised. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. The call is raised. Majority Leader, oh, wait. Hold on. I gotta. The once and future speaker.
I think it's future former.
I've got a few more in the queue.
Okay, that's great. I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we're going to move into general orders. I just wanted to give you the list of bills, and there will be printouts up here. But it's going to go Senate Bill 003, Senate Bill 2, Senate Bill 4, and then Senate Bill 1.
Okay, we'll do the committee reports first. Mr. Gregorio, please read the committee reports.
Committee on Appropriations. After consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 1 be amended as follows and be so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 2 be amended as follows and be so amended be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 3 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 4 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
All right, then with that, we are going into general orders. Second reading of bills. Representative Valdez A. You all have heard the motion. Seeing no objection, Representative Valdez will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there is a request for reading the bill at length. Committee reports are printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads. Bills will be laid over upon motion of the majority leader, and the court rule is relaxed. With that, Mr. Gregorio, please read the title of Senate Bill 2000. Oh, Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been asked by the sponsors to reorder a little bit, so I move to proceed out of order for Senate Bill 4. We'll start with Senate Bill 4.
You've heard the motion. Seeing no objection, we will proceed out of order. For consideration of Senate Bill 4. Mr. Gregorio, please read the title to Senate Bill 4.
Senate Bill 20B-004 by Senator Moreno, also Representative McCluskey, concerning a transfer from the general fund to the Controlled Maintenance Trust Fund of money that will be available to the governor for a limited time for the transfer to the Disaster Emergency Fund for public health and emergency response expenses associated with the COVID-19 pandemic emergency.
Representative McCluskey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is an honor to serve with you.
And you.
Thank you. I move Senate Bill 20B-004 on second reading.
To the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill does an important and essential funding for the state in this moment. We are transferring $100 million from the general fund to the Controlled Maintenance Trust Fund. The governor is then authorized to further transfer those funds to the Disaster Emergency Fund in order to support public health and emergency response expenses related to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is essential for a very important reason. Our Disaster Emergency Fund has been drawn down to $0, and yet the public health crisis persists. We are seeing an incredible increase in the number of individuals with the disease. We have seen an incredible increase in the requirements from our public health departments, both here at the state level as well as in local public health agencies across the state. These funds go directly to purchasing testing supplies, personal protective equipment, helping us stand up alternative care sites when our hospitals are reaching capacity. It is critical that we provide these funds during this moment to make sure that we are taking care of Coloradans during such a difficult time. With that, I urge your support of Senate Bill 004.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 4? Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, please forgive my little bit of a scattered attention span right now. This kind of came up quickly, and I'm trying to get organized here, but I certainly want to thank the bill sponsor for bringing this, and thank you for the discussion. There are some things, though, that my constituency would like me to fight for, and so I will be doing that today. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I move L003 and ask for it to be displayed.
Amendment L003 has been moved. Thank you. And is properly displayed. Please proceed, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, members, I wanted to take the opportunity here to raise a very important discussion in Colorado, and as you can see, what this amendment does is essentially it says or puts in place protections for churches and other places of worship. The governor will be handcuffed if he tries to place any limits or restrictions on houses of worship, and I think this is important enough that we fight for. The First Amendment certainly guarantees the right of people to worship however they please, and I think it's important that we respect that and we do whatever we can to protect those houses of worship. And the only way that I think we can do so at this time, given the proclamation that we have and the bills that we're working with, that this is one good way that we could do it. The governor, I think, has the responsibility to deal with this pandemic in a responsible way, but I want to ensure that we have appropriate guardrails in place that that prevent him or any other state agency from harming churches or prohibiting anyone with any sort of religious affiliation or background from being able to gather, worship, what have you. And I think we've seen this to be a problem across the country, but even here in Colorado. And we need to be standing up as one body to make sure that these people are protected. And I think especially in light of the recent United States Supreme Court ruling that we saw with respect to New York, the majority found that just because there's a pandemic that there's no excuse for the First Amendment or for people's religious freedom to take a back seat as governments deal with it. So I'd ask for a yes vote on this.
Representative McCluskey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill very specifically speaks to the funding that is required for disaster emergency fund expenses, COVID expenses. It does not speak to the variety of public health protocols and guidelines that have come from the State Department as well as local public health agencies. I believe this amendment speaks to those issues. Those are not related to this bill, and I urge a no vote.
Representative Sandridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I stand in support of this amendment. And, these are tough decisions to make. I actually have my father has a friend who went to his church and caught COVID and died. But one thing is, freedom can be risky at times, and our First Amendment rights shouldn't be diluted. And I think it's perfectly fine if somebody wants to take it upon themselves and practice their faith at home and not go to church. I think that's great, but we need to let people decide how much risk they want to take. Let them decide how they want to practice their faith. They may not make decisions that we make. We may not agree with them. But that's what the First Amendment allows. It allows people to make their decisions, and it allows people to suffer the consequences of their decisions. So I think on times like this is when we really need to step up and protect the Constitution. During times like this is when it can be the most difficult, but we need to stand firm in people making their decisions, whether we agree with it or not. So I stand in support of this, and hopefully everybody will stand in support of our First Amendment. Thank you.
Representative Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I come down in full support of this amendment. One thing we've learned through this pandemic is some of the other costs to our communities, our society, is the depression, suicide, and things like this. Places of worship are their sanctuary, the place that these people can seek some help on a spiritual level. And no matter what is going on, a pandemic or anything should not step on our First Amendment rights. And anytime we can put this in writing, put it in print, I think it's a great thing. So I'm in full support of this amendment.
Representative Ransom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too would like to rise in support of this amendment. We have seen some issues happening in other states. New York was mentioned. We've also heard it in California, where governors, under the guise of a state of emergency that was in effect, put all kinds of restrictions upon the citizens of that state. And in this time, when we are allocating funding to the governor to deal with the state of emergency that he has declared, would be as good of a time as any, and actually the best time, to also put the restrictions that we as a legislature choose to add because of the constitutional allowances that are given to all the citizens to practice their religion in manner that they see fit. We do have a freedom of religion in this country. It's something that I ran on, the Constitution and protecting constitutional rights for my constituents and for the entire state of Colorado. I think it's very important that we not fall into the same trap that some of the other states have fallen into, where we have churches that are trying to meet requirements of the government by saying that their church service is, for example, a riot or a protest, so that they can actually worship their God the way that they choose to, according to the First Amendment's protections of their freedom of religion. And this is a great place in this bill that goes along with the funding that we are providing and writing over for the governor to add this requirement that he allow churches and all places of worship to practice the way that they would like to, and that that the governor cannot put restrictions on them. So again, I urge an aye vote on this amendment.
Representative Paisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So way back in March, Governor Polis declared the state of emergency that we've been under ever since. If you look at the statute that gives the governor that authority, it uses the term 30 days. Now, it also then says that he can extend that condition, that emergency condition. And I think that was an oversight from the folks that wrote that statute in the first place. However, 30 days meant something to somebody. Why is it now 10 months later when there was 30 days written in there? If there was no original intent for there to be a limit to the state of emergency, then there would not have been a number of days placed in the statute in the first place. 30 days, or an extension implied of another 30 days, so perhaps a maximum 60 days. When we continue on in the state of emergency and then have emergency orders numbering over 230, we are no longer living under a constitutional republic. We are living under the imagination, the preference of one particular person, one office holder, and that is not how our nation was ever intended to operate. When I look at all of these bills that have made it all the way through to this floor, none of them address putting some guardrails around how the governor can operate when it comes to the emergency conditions and the force that he has placed imposing his will on all of the small businesses that are suffering, people who are suffering tremendously. Here is one step towards putting some guardrails around that. It's a tiny step. It is not the solution, but it addresses, let's think about putting some guardrails around what is certainly an unconstitutional approach to how we are being governed right now in this state. This is a tiny step, and we owe at least this little amount to our constituents, to the citizens of the state of Colorado, to stop imposing one governor's will on houses of worship. Please bear in mind that the United States Supreme Court made it perfectly clear some time ago. It was 1866, but the United States Supreme Court made it very clear that our constitutional rights are not suspended in a time of emergency, nor even a time of war. They are eternal. They are endowed to us in an unalienable fashion by our Creator. The purpose of government is to ensure those rights, has no right to overstep those constitutional rights that we all hold and we hold dear. This is one step towards that, and it's a good reminder, and I think we ought to support it, and we ought not to fight this little bit when we really ought to be doing something much bigger than this. So I ask for an aye vote.
Further discussion on L003. Representative Maslowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to speak to a couple of issues quickly, I too honor the freedom of religion and our opportunity and need to worship during this very difficult time. I push back on the statements that my colleague made about this being a part of our governor's imagination. For those people who have lost their lives in our state and our nation, it is an incredibly difficult and very real moment. The fact that this bill is coming forward and is focused on the funding that this state needs to respond to the pandemic emergency is critical to the ongoing operations of our public health and emergency response systems. This bill is specific to the funding for those expenses that the state is incurring. We will transfer $100 million to the Controlled Maintenance Trust Fund, and there is the authorization for the governor to transfer those funds from the CMTF to the Disaster Emergency Fund for expenses related to the public health and emergency response specifically. Any other focus on public health guidance that has been coming from CDPHE or from the governor's office should remain outside of this bill. This addresses the funding and very specifically protecting the Tabor Emergency Reserve that we are required to provide each and every year through the long bill. With that, I urge an aye vote on Senate Bill 004. Oops, I urge a no vote, sorry, on Amendment L003. Thank you.
Representative Baisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, we knew what you meant. Again, I agree that it is not the ideal place in this bill to address putting some guardrails, but we have no other options. The bill that started in the Senate to address those guardrails did not make it on this list. It never made it to this floor, and it won't. And that is shameful to me. We should have had the nerve in this body to address the elephant in the room. Do you recall back in March, the term flatten the curve? That was the goal, to flatten the curve. And the idea of flattening the curve was to not overwhelm the hospitals with folks who contracted COVID-19. We flattened the curve. It is not a static problem that we're working with, because back then there was an overreach, and it was an appropriate overreach because we understood very little about this disease, about this virus. So much has been learned now about the respiratory nature of this, about the attack on the lungs, and how to treat it, and how to treat it rapidly to prevent the lungs from being incapacitated. So people are surviving in large numbers. The death rate is very small, and a lot of people have contracted a whole lot more have contracted COVID-19 that are recorded. Eventually, we all have COVID-19, or at least it becomes just another part of what our immune system deals with as a race.
Rep. Baisley, could you bring it back to the amendment for me, please?
I apologize.
Can you please get back to the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I shall. So we have one opportunity that I see to address where we ought to be going as a body, and that is to get back to some reality, and this is a way to do that. This is a small step again. It says, let's not overrun our houses of worship. Let's not act in an unconstitutional manner as a state, as a government, and let's allow freedom of worship, which is a right under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which is still intact even during an emergency. And so I think it's wholly appropriate to have one little foot in the door, and let's not stomp out the only moment of addressing government overreach during this pandemic, and let's lift up an essential piece of our lives, which is worshiping the Creator who endowed us with our rights in the first place.
Representative Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to rise in support of this amendment and just speak briefly to free exercise of religion and the importance of churches and worship to communities across Colorado. And certainly, we support all First Amendment rights. There's a number of clauses there. And in recent memory, of course, we saw protests in the state and fully stand for free speech and the right to protest. Of course, you know, there are reasons for people to have problems with the violence and destruction of property and shutting down traffic and those sorts of things. But in principle, of course, certainly free speech and freedom of religion has been an absolute bedrock value in this country. And churches need to be able to meet. That's what a church is. It is the Greek word that it comes from is ecclesia, which means a gathering. It is the body of Christ in Christian terms meeting together, and it is essential to Christian worship. And whatever religion it is, constitutionally, it is protected, and we should make sure that that is observed in our state, and this is one way to do it, a creative way to do it. Thank you, Representative Williams, and have this conversation now, because this is something that we need to make sure, and we're seeing increasingly the courts around the country, including the Supreme Court, are taking action to protect freedom of religion. And so I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Representative Sane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also rise in support of this amendment. And I, too, have observed that there has been some arbitrary and capricious, basically approval given to certain things, certain activities performed in mass, like protests and such, but not the freedom to gather in mass in church. And so I do support this amendment, not only for that reason, but we just celebrated a holiday, Thanksgiving, and part of that holiday tradition is looking back to religious freedom. And you know, some of our first pilgrims that came over because you know, they didn't want to worship in a certain way. They wanted to have the freedom to worship God in the way that they thought was fitting. So with that, members, I mentioned the other day that our churches were our first food pantries, and in a sense, they're kind of still our first responders in a lot of senses. For example, when something befalls a family, something unfortunate, if it's COVID or something else, the church family is often the first ones there. I see them raking leaves, mowing lawns, delivering groceries to people who are recovering from this and other things. And this is a worthy activity. It should not be suppressed. It is part of our Constitution. Our Constitution does not go away in the middle of a pandemic. And in fact, this is the cornerstone of many of our communities, is the church. So again, I rise in support of this amendment, and I also urge a yes vote.
Representative Liston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
And you?
Members, I rise in support of this amendment, L003. First of all, we just heard this in Public Health and Human Services, but just barely 3-4 hours ago. And there was, I commend the sponsors. There was good testimony, and it passed unanimously, if I'm not mistaken. It passed unanimously in our committee, and I think one of the points you also brought up, it passed unanimously out of the Senate. You know, congratulations. That's not easy to do on any bill. So there is very good support, certainly on the Senate side. There's good support on our side, and all we're asking with this amendment is, you know, we're not asking for an arm and a leg or a finger or anything. Just, you know, in all candor, for our good colleagues on this side of the aisle, just meet us a little ways, not even halfway, not even a third way. This is a very reasonable amendment. in light of what the churches and other religious organizations have gone through here over the last many months, where they can't meet, or they barely can meet, they've been closed down, or if people can show up at their church or synagogue or wherever it may be, tremendous limitations have been placed on our churches, and they too have suffered. And here is December 1st. We're going into the Advent, and one of our most holiest of all days that we're going to be celebrating in another 24 days, the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. And a lot of the churches still are feeling betwixt and between and frustrated that they will be unable to have their services, which is probably, other than Easter, the most holiest day of the year. So I say to our good colleagues on this side of the aisle, meet us just a little ways. Just take a partial small step. That's all we're asking for. And let's help and safeguard the churches and synagogues that are in all of our communities that play such an important role. So with that, I urge an aye vote on L003. Thank you very much.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, fellow colleagues, for your attention. First of all, I rise in opposition to this amendment. I hate to inform my colleagues, but this bill has nothing to do with your freedoms. This bill has nothing to do with your constitutional rights. This bill has nothing to do with freedom of worship or the First Amendment. I know you've reached out there with this amendment, but it has nothing to do with what we're talking about in this bill. Now, I know your frustration, and I share it. The hypocrisy of public policy when people are allowed to protest and riot by the hundreds and thousands, yet a place of worship cannot gather by 20, 30, or 50 to express their faith. I understand that. I understand the hypocrisy. But that is the legacy that has been left by our public policy makers and their leadership. Now, I don't want you to be misguided by the intent of this bill.
Representative Holtorf, can you please speak to the amendment?
And the amendment, which is stated right here. Emergency. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just getting ready to speak to the amendment at that moment. Your timing was perfect. The quintessential reason we are here as a legislative body these 3 days is because of this bill. Make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, fellow colleagues, the governor needs money. And the legislative body is the power of the purse, and we are the ones that can provide the governor that money for whatever he sees or thinks he needs to meet the needs that he perceives as necessary in his role as the governor. So I will tell you that despite the fact that you and your constituents and my constituents urge us for leadership, urge us to protect their constitutional rights, beg that leaders in our government do not take those constitutional rights in any time, war or peace, crisis or non-crisis, I will tell you that is not what this is about. So I ask my colleagues to get focused. If Governor Polis needs funds, then we are here and been directed to get him the money. So I rise in opposition to this amendment.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I did want to respond to my colleague, Representative Holtorf. I have a lot of respect for your opinion. I certainly take what you're saying is, I think, a very important point. I do happen to disagree. This bill pertains to giving the governor money to deal with the COVID pandemic. The reason this is related is because the governor is going to be able to use that money to impose whatever public policy guidelines, restrictions, limitations, whatever you will. It's going to fund his agenda. And if his agenda is to further impose restrictions on churches or other places of worship, then I feel that it's necessary for us to say, okay, you can have this money to help respond to this pandemic, but with these strings attached. And the string attached here is leave churches alone, leave pastors alone, leave worshipers alone. In the good book, the Bible, talks about us not forsaking the gathering of the brethren. And there's a good reason for that. And as we see this pandemic play out, we're seeing the consequences of people who are unable to actually go and worship in the way that they normally would. And as a consequence of that, you're seeing an increase in mental health issues that are leading to suicides. And the other thing I'd like to point out that brought forth this amendment was the simple fact that any of the bills that we heard in committee never actually got to the floor. So this is the only vehicle that I foresaw that I could use to impose this type of guardrail so that we're protecting those who want to worship freely, which is a guaranteed right in our First Amendment. So while I hear exactly what you're saying, Representative Holtorf, and while this bill doesn't necessarily deal with the specific restrictions that are put in place, I can't find any other vehicle to try and put these safeguards in at the moment. And so that's why I did what I did, and I still encourage a yes vote on this because ultimately we shouldn't be tolerating any sort of restriction on worshipers. It's a fundamental aspect of our country. It's part of the reason we were founded in the first place, religious freedom. And so I ask everyone here in this body to please vote yes on this. The governor can still have the necessary resources to deal with this pandemic. All we're asking is that the governor doesn't punish churches while he does it. Thank you.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Williams. And I'm listening to you, and I do empathize. And I do understand that you are seeking to have the freedom of religious worship for Coloradoans. And I would implore the governor to step forward based on the powers that he currently holds in this state of emergency to give the guidance that places of worship can worship while they protect themselves, and that is never abrogated or taken away in any way. Unfortunately, and I do understand the amendment, it is unfortunate that this or other types of protections and freedoms that our constituents have asked us to reinstate or reinforce as citizens, that we do not have legislation coming out of this General Assembly to reinforce that. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a political will in this body or in this chamber. And I don't know if we collectively have the ability or the liberty at this time to even pursue those notions. But I will tell you that this particular amendment, I wish there was a better place. I wish there was a better place so we could reestablish the importance of religious worship. I just don't know if this is the right place. If this is the only place, then please let me know that there's no other option, and I will consider withdrawing my opposition to this amendment.
Representative Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just come to the Wells in support of this amendment. We all saw what we considered what was essential. I think most people know that my faith is essential. My faith is everything. And if I felt that my Walmart would be essential, then my church I would also consider is essential. So I would absolutely support this amendment, and please consider it for the people that hold their faith in such high regard. So thank you.
Further discussion. Representative Williams.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I wanted to kind of respond to this discussion I'm having with at least one of my colleagues, Representative Holtorf here. I appreciate everything you're saying, Representative. I really do. And I'm not sure if there's anything else more I could add to it, just to maybe just reinforce again what I've kind of previously stated. We're for this amendment, for the support of this amendment, the necessity of this amendment has to deal with the fact that there are a number of bills that didn't make it to the floor, and this is the only, I think, bill that I was able to craft an amendment that would be able to address this. Now we all understand separation of powers, right? We all understand that the governor, being the chief executive, has the right and the ability to enforce the laws. But here in the legislature, we make those laws. In addition to making those laws, we also appropriate the money. And as we appropriate the money, we have every right to attach certain conditions when those monies are to be spent or used, appropriated, what have you. And if we're going to make this transfer, then I think we're well within our right, and we have the ability then to say, okay, Mr. Governor, here's what you need to deal with this pandemic, but here's also a guardrail. Here's a line that you should not cross. And I think standing up for our First Amendment as it relates to protecting the religious freedom that we enjoy in this country, I think that's something that we should and can do, regardless of what the original intent or purpose of the bill may have been. We should be taking every opportunity we can to tell churchgoers, you matter. What you do, what you believe is something that we're going to protect and that we understand is sacred. And I'm just not sure why there would be opposition to this. We shouldn't want churches to have any sort of restrictions in place that really take away the meaningful worship that's conducted in those houses. And I would ask the majority here to think about that. I mean, there's no sense, and there really is no sense in helping any of our state agencies or the governor imposing any more restrictions on churches, especially given the fact that the Supreme Court, I think, is going to continue ruling in favor of people that want to worship in the way that they normally would. We read the most recent article that in a 5-4 decision with Amy Coney Barrett ruling in favor of religious liberty, that I think it's a clear sign that that's where the court is headed. And thank God that it's headed that way. So I would just, again, renew my call to support this amendment. Let's go ahead and cut out the nonsense. Let's avoid any litigation that could arise against the state of Colorado for any violations against our constitutional rights. And let's just make a stand right now and say we want to protect churches. And Governor, you can do what you need to do to respond to this pandemic, but just leave the churches alone. Let them worship. Let them come together and let them do what they've been doing, for centuries now, and that's worshiping the Lord and serving their neighbors. So thank you.
Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow colleagues. I understand the message, and once again, I would ask the governor for his guidance and his leadership in opening and retaining the ability for those Coloradoans that need to find God and seek God to have that ability to worship in the house of their choice in a manner that is safe to those individuals in a time of desperate need. After some consideration and some dialogue with some of my colleagues, Mr. Chairman, I withdraw my opposition to this amendment.
Further discussion on Amendment L003, Representative Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, members, I thought it would be helpful to us if we could kind of lay out what the current restrictions are to our houses of worship and life rights. So obviously we have a dial in Colorado, and the dial has been adjusted. There's now a fifth color on there beyond the red. And so I'll just start at orange, because obviously, given where we are, I think that's probably most applicable. And so this is in direct relations to how it's laid out now with our dial. And it says, if the county is in orange, houses of worship and life rights may operate at 25% of the posted occupancy limit indoors, not to exceed 50 people, excluding staff, whichever is less, per room, calculated using the distancing space calculator. For seated events, as described in Appendix 1, the usable space may be calculated using 6 feet distancing between non-household contacts instead of using the calculator. Outdoor worship services shall operate at the same level as blue. So that was orange. So when we look at the dial and we look at red, houses of worship and life rights may operate at 25% of the posted occupancy limit indoors, not to exceed 50 people, excluding staff, whichever is less, per room, calculated using the distancing space calculator. For seated events as described in Appendix 1, and then it goes on, obviously we do have a fifth color on the dial, and that's if it's in purple. And it says houses of worship and life rights are encouraged to provide services through remote online platforms or in an outdoor setting, or may provide in-person services for up to for groups of 10 or fewer per room, excluding staff. And so, members, when I look at this, and then I can feel the cool air that's coming in through the window over here. It's wintertime. I mean, it's December 1st. We've got Christmas, it's about to happen. And here we have recommendations for online. Sure, that works. And I think most churches prior to the pandemic were probably offering some form of an online venue. But to know that the other option outside of limitations is to worship outside. I don't know how convenient that is for folks. Most services, whether they start at 7:30 in the morning or 10 o'clock or maybe even a 6 p.m. service, it's pretty cool outside right now. And so that can make it rather difficult. And it's just one more obstacle that's there that we should have the freedom to exercise, and which is protected under our First Amendment. And so I just wanted to come up here and kind of lay out what the restrictions are. Now, this amendment doesn't impede other factions of the governor's and his ability to exercise his executive powers. This just simply says, hey, if we are going to have limitations on your First Amendment, well, then you can't move that money from one place to the next. And I think that's fair, because ultimately, at the end of the day, the amendment that Representative Williams brought is basically saying it's defending our First Amendment. I stand here in support of this amendment. I'd like to see us adopt it. I don't think any of our constituents will push back. It is a great vehicle in which we as Colorado can make a stand and say we too. We value our First Amendment, and this is just a good way for us to put some sort of a protection mechanism, a restriction in the appropriation of funds. Mr. Chair, it's getting a little loud. If we could.
Members, can we keep the volume down in the back or take your conversations off the floor, please? All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. And so I do. I renew my support for this amendment. I think it's a great vehicle that we as legislators should look to. And I know that there's a concern, right, because the deadline is Wednesday, right? We're trying to get out of here by Wednesday. And if we adopt this amendment, well, then that will require it to go back to the Senate for concurrence, and that could delay things further. But I think our First Amendment is important enough that if we go into Thursday, that we should consider this and not take options off the table because we're trying to hold true to a time clock. So, members, I would encourage your support. The Supreme Court has ruled, I think it's a 33-page opinion, which I think I can probably get and bring up here and read. I'm not sure how many people have had the opportunity to read that yet. But I did just want to go ahead and reference that we do have some restrictions now. We do have the dial. The dial is pretty clear. And so I would encourage support for this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion on L003. Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think I want to hit on 2 or 3 themes. What a government can do under the First Amendment is to implement a law of general applicability that will affect religious institutions, and those are churches, and they are synagogues, and they are mosques, and they are others, for the record, in a general way. What a government cannot do is single out as a category religious institutions as opposed to, say, nonprofit offices or gyms or otherwise. That has been violative of First Amendment case law for a long time, and appropriately so. And that, I do not believe, is what we have been talking about at any point in the public health orders that we've all been experiencing since March. What the adverted to 5-4 decision actually was a 5-4 vote to grant a preliminary injunction pending resolution of an appeal to the Second Circuit and possible cert petition on the merits thereafter. And I will spare everybody a recitation of the elements of a motion for a preliminary injunction just to save some time here. I think it also matters in that case that there were some bad facts in the record that feed into the question of how you resolve a motion for a PI. Government officials in New York had said some things indicative of, I don't know, a degree of prejudice against a certain faith tradition. Bluntly, I think they screwed up. There has not been a merits ruling on that, and it may never reach the Supreme Court. It depends on if they take cert from the Second Circuit, and we'll see when the Second Circuit even gets done with the matter. So I don't want that issue to be mischaracterized up here and taken for more than what it is. Government may not, and more importantly, should not, be prejudicial against faith as a category. A government may implement laws of general effect, in this case, for public safety. I think one of the greatest tragedies of this year is that a lot of the standard mileposts by which we all as humans live our lives, births, deaths, weddings, ceremonies following birth, depending on your faith tradition, have been interrupted. Like, we're all going to remember these things for a long time. But I will add, I grew up with 3 different faith traditions. I had one Episcopalian grandparent, I had one Roman Catholic grandparent, I had 2 Jewish grandparents. I was exposed to a lot of different things growing up. But I think the weight of all of that is to be conscious of the world that you're in and the community that you're a part of. And broadly speaking, just to try to be decent to other people, to try to not hurt other people. And at the end of the day, that's what this public health guidance comes down to. So no, I do not think that we should be in the business of having any prejudice against the practice of religion. That is not even what this amendment says. This is going farther than what the First Amendment requires, and this is carving out religious institutions and saying they should be entirely apart from any degree of public health protection that science might indicate. Now, you could lay that forth as a policy position, and that is a prerogative of any member. But I want to be clear, that's what this text is saying. This is not simply codifying First Amendment case law, whether 2 weeks old or 100 years old. This is going considerably farther than that. And it doesn't square with the faith traditions that I was exposed to growing up. So for that reason, and the reasons capably laid forth by Rep. McCluskey, I urge a no vote on the amendment.
Further discussion on L003? Seeing none. The question before us is the adoption of Amendment L003. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The noes have it. The amendment is lost. To the bill. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, the other aspect of this bill that I wanted to address had to do with, I think, a situation we saw when the CARES Act money came in initially, and that's something that I'd like to correct moving forward. So with that, Mr. Chair, I move L004 and ask that it be displayed.
L004 has been moved and is properly displayed to the amendment. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, members, if you recall, the unfortunate part of this situation that we find ourselves in the pandemic and the response to it has necessitated this amendment. Again, if you recall, the federal government sent us relief money, sent all the states relief money, and the governor got to spend pretty much all of it. So, you know, I think this is a very simple issue for us, and while I respect the Senate, I cannot agree, you know, with their unanimous vote on this bill. If they want to give away, you know, their authority to appropriate funds, that's their prerogative, but I think the lower chamber should think about this a little bit longer and not be so hasty in passing this bill without that kind of protection. So what this amendment would do is it would essentially say that moving forward, if any more federal funds come in to the state related to the COVID pandemic, that those funds would first have to be appropriated by the General Assembly. I think it's a simple bill. I think it protects our authority as a legislature. And more importantly, I think it puts the decision-making back in the hands of the people through their elected representatives. I know this is something that many of our colleagues in this chamber talked about being an issue and a problem. And I think this is a great way for us to put a guardrail in place that allows us to have a hand in making sure that money is appropriated through the proper channel, and that channel is the legislative branch, not the executive. So I would ask for a yes vote on this.
Representative McCluskey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, I urge a no vote on this amendment. If federal funds are issued to the state and come with custodial authority, then it is not our place to authorize those funds. They will be deemed the governor's. Secondly, the state, if we receive a federal reimbursement, we have made it clear any federal funding that should be used to reimburse the expenditures from the Disaster Emergency Fund. I urge a no vote on the amendment.
Further discussion on L004. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I anticipated that objection from the majority, and so I took it upon myself to write or have written a substitute amendment just in case it came up. So with that, Mr. Chair, I move substitute amendment L005 and ask that it be displayed.
L005 has been moved as a substitute amendment and is displayed to the substitute amendment. Representative Williams.
Members, it's a bit technical, but suffice it to say, what this amendment does is it clearly allows for the legislature now, in this instance, under these conditions right here, for us to have a say in the distribution and appropriation of any funds that come from the federal government. The argument about custodial funds that the bill sponsor briefly discussed here is a legitimate point. I simply disagree with it, but even with my own disagreement, it was probably appropriate for me to narrow the scope of what I'm trying to do to at least allow for the legislature to get back its right to appropriate funds in which it receives. You know, call me crazy, but the legislature is the one that has control of the purse strings. And I'm not necessarily concerned on where the revenue comes from. The point of all of this is to ensure that the people's representatives, the ones who are directly representing and being a voice for those constituencies, those are the people, those are the individuals in government that should be the ones who have a say on where money is directed. The governor, like I said, is a part of the executive branch. His role is to enforce the law and, of course, any appropriations that the legislature sends forward. But at the end of the day, the legislature is the proper place for where we decide where money is directed. And I don't think we should give that up so easily. And I'm somewhat concerned and shocked that the majority would be willing to give that up to an executive. Perhaps because the majority is within the same party, maybe it's not as big of a concern. But I'm trying to look long term here. It's possible that there could be a Republican governor that gets elected, and I want to put in place something that allows for the legislative branch to reassert its authority regardless of who's in the governor's mansion. So I would ask for a yes vote on this substitute motion.
Any further discussion on the substitute amendment? Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I suppose I appreciate the attempt to respond to the point that Rep. McCluskey made. This amendment is not a successful response, however, to the threshold issue here, whether money that the state receives from the United States is custodial funds. There are decades and decades of cases on this. The good folks downstairs have spent a lot of time thinking about it. I don't even know how many hours rereading those cases, debating with our lawyers downstairs about the language in CARES, primarily. It wasn't so much a question any of the other legislation. It actually varies a lot what Congress does if you go back and look at it. Sometimes they're very specific. Congress will write into a bill, the governor shall, something like that. We may or may not like it. That's the governor of a state's discretion by Congress. It is also within the appropriative power of Congress to say the legislature of a state shall. Then there's no question the other way. There are, I don't know how many dozens of examples that you can find talked about in cases that have reached our Supreme Court, and again, that the good folks downstairs have analyzed. I would like us to get back to the threshold matter of dealing with the fiscal issues that the bill is about, that the sponsor has spoken to. Again, the question whether some stream of revenue coming to Colorado from Congress is custodial funds or not depends first and foremost on what the language is in the Congressional Act. Nothing we say or do here is going to change that. That is not really how that analysis works. So, look, I would like there to be discretion in the future too. I'm a pretty big believer in Article 5 prerogatives. This is not how to get at it. This is not responsive to the threshold issue. I ask for a no vote on the substitute amendment.
Further discussion on substitute amendment L005? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of substitute amendment L005. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
The noes have it. To the amendment. Any further discussion on L004? Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I urge a yes vote on this amendment, which is under debate right now. Like Representative Williams hinted at, this is not a Republican or Democrat issue. It's not even House versus Senate issue. This is a legislative branch issue that we should all work together on. It is our prerogative, power of the purse. It goes back to the very founding documents of both the United States Constitution and the state constitution. And I think we should all work together to pass this amendment into law. I remember a time when a governor vetoed a bill, and it so angered the legislature unanimously overturned the veto when given the opportunity. Even the substance of that bill was something that, as the bill was going through the legislature, it was very divisive. But when it came to the legislature standing in relation to the executive branch, the legislature joined together as one and sent with a strong message to the executive branch that we ought to be heard and we ought to be part of the process. So I urge a yes vote on this and urge all my colleagues to join me.
Representative McKean.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have a question I think is germane to how to
function through this amendment, and if you wouldn't mind humoring me. My question is, we're transferring money from, again, the general fund to the Controlled Maintenance Trust Fund to go to the Disaster Emergency Fund. Why can't we just transfer from the general fund to the Disaster Emergency Fund?
Representative McCluskey.
Thank you, Representative McKean. We could, but we took a position as we were processing what the need was and our hope for as much transparency as possible. We felt putting the dollars into the Controlled Maintenance Trust Fund gave us the opportunity to hold those funds there and not spend them immediately on Disaster Emergency Fund needs. So the $100 million will go into the Controlled Maintenance Trust Fund. This does also help meet our requirement for a 3% Tabor Emergency Reserve. Last spring, as part of that requirement, we appropriated $75 million. This year, we're putting that money in a bit earlier because we have depleted the Disaster Emergency Fund to zero, and we have drawn down the Controlled Maintenance Trust Fund by more than $80 million. By putting it here first, the governor will be required to issue an executive order to transfer those funds to the Disaster Emergency Fund for those expenses as they come in before they are reimbursed by FEMA. This at least gives us a one-step process in that, one step in the process for us to be able to see.
Representative McKean.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that answer and the detail and everything else. I think that's good. Number one, when he issues that executive order, will it call out specifically every dollar and the purpose of that dollar? So there's a subsequent question. And then, what guarantee do we have that the FEMA reimbursements are actually going to come in the next fiscal year? I happen to be a representative of House District 51, which is Loveland, Colorado. We had some monstrous floods back in 2013. We are still waiting 7 years later to be reimbursed by FEMA. So are we heading into, and I'll just use the word, a situation of deficit spending as we spend money that we anticipate getting, but we don't know when we get it?
Representative McCluskey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative McKean. While I can't speak to FEMA's practice with the floods, and certainly it is tragic how long that has taken. Right now, OSPB tells me that it's taking 6 to 8 weeks to get these expenses reimbursed and back to the state. We're reimbursed at a rate of 75%. The state pays for 25%. So while I suppose there is no guarantee, in this current moment, that is the experience that we are having.
Further discussion, Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
It's an honor to serve with you.
I can't talk. I'm sorry. Sorry for the delay. I have a question in regards to FEMA and how all of that takes place. This is it's above my pay grade, to tell you the truth. What I'm wondering is, if FEMA does not pay the state of Colorado the reimbursement that we're considering, how is the shortfall in the state of Colorado then made up? Is this out of dollars that we're supposed to be getting in from taxes? Is this money off of the September projections? And if that's the case, aren't we due another projection in December? And in reality, are we doing this way too early if we don't have that secondary projection in?
Representative McCluskey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Catlin. So the dollars for not only Senate Bill 004, but also our other pieces of legislation are based on the fact that when we ended fiscal year 1920, we ended up with a revenue surplus, additional revenues we had not anticipated in the forecast that we had received in May that really helped us drive our budget. In May, we projected a $3.3 billion shortfall. We presented a balanced budget, passed that balanced budget based on that projection. In September, we are happy to say that the state realized a surplus in revenues from the 2019 income tax dollars that were realized. That surplus by both the Ledge Council and OSPB economic forecasts was roughly $800 to $900 million above what we had originally anticipated. So while we are looking at a series of bills right now to provide hardworking families relief, whether that's related to housing, utilities, food assistance, childcare, or we're looking at supporting our small business community, those dollars and the dollars for this transfer to the Controlled Maintenance Trust Fund are coming from that surplus that we've realized at the end of the fiscal year 1920. I hope that answers your question, Representative Catlin.
Further discussion, Representative Baisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got to say this amendment is the least partisan amendment that I have seen Representative Williams ever put together. And just to emphasize what I mean, I'm going to make it a partisan amendment for a moment, just to give it the perspective of why we ought to jealously guard our role in the legislature as being the holders of the purse. So I'm going to add some words. I'll start with the middle. The governor shall not spend any federal funds that the state receives related to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency unless those funds have been appropriated by the democratically controlled General Assembly, which is the case as it is right now. Let's make it partisan for a moment and realize the majority is in control of this purse, appropriately so. That's how the people elected us, elected this body. They always give a majority, and the majority would be in control. This is not surrendering any power over to those conservatives. This is holding on to the power that is due in the way that we are constructed as a nation, as a state in the first place, constitutionally, to where the power of the purse, the decisions of how money gets spent, should be made first in this body, this chamber and the one down the hall. We ought to, together, jealously guard that role that is appropriately given to us as responsibility. So that's all this does. It gives that balance, those balance of powers that we've heard about all our lives in how America is put together. So let's do this. It's a really a smartly crafted amendment, and I would urge everyone to think about, yeah, this is not a partisan amendment. This is not a clever idea that Representative Williams come up with. It's really appropriately stepping up to our responsibility as the House of Representatives and as the State Senate. And I think we ought to pass this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion on L004. Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L004. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. The noes have it. The amendment is lost. To the bill. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 4. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 004 is passed. Mr. Gregorio, please read the title of Senate Bill. Oh, Mrs. Future Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move to proceed out of order for consideration of Senate Bill 1. And people have to speak.
You have heard the motion. Seeing no objection, we will proceed out of order to Senate Bill 001. Mr. Gregorio, please read the title of Senate Bill 001.
Senate Bill 20B-001 by Senators Winter and Priola, also Representatives Harrod and Sandridge, concerning support for entities impacted by severe capacity restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Representative Gonzalez-Gutierrez.
I ask that we go into a recess.
We will stand in a brief recess. The House will come back to order. We are now on Senate Bill 1. Representative Herod.
We're looking for him. They're all looking for him.
Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask for a brief recess.
The committee will stand in a brief recess.
Ave Maria. I picked an easy one.
All right, the committee will come back to order.
He's not here.
Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 1 and the Finance Committee report.
To the finance report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Finance Committee tweaked some definitions.
1 second,
and,
Representative Herod. Is there an appropriations report? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the Appropriations Committee report.
All right, to the appropriations report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Appropriations Committee appropriated money. I ask for an aye vote.
All right, any further discussion on the appropriations report? Seeing none, the question is the adoption of the appropriations report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Ayes have it. Appropriation report is adopted. To the finance report, Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Should I move it again? I move the Finance Committee report.
To the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Finance Committee made some changes in regards to definitions around artists and tightens up some other definitions. I ask for an aye vote.
Further discussion on the finance report, Representative Van Winkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to praise and thank the sponsors and the Finance Committee for the very good work they did. I know you just kind of glanced over a little bit as that they did good work, and I concur they did very good work. In fact, they added some very important language in here that I plan to add on second reading, and I very much appreciate that work being done in the Finance Committee and giving the General Assembly some powers to understand exactly what's happening to this money, making sure there's accountability that follows in the years ahead. And I want to thank the sponsors and the Finance Committee for that work.
All right, further discussion on the finance report. Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the finance report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The finance report is adopted. To the bill, Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move the bill, right?
Yes, to the bill.
I move, so Senate Bill 1. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we all know, our small businesses have been hurting through this pandemic. Right now, we have public health requirements that are really hurting the capacity of our small businesses, and it's incumbent upon us to provide relief. I want to be clear with you guys that this bill is no panacea. It's no silver bullet. This is just providing bridge relief to these small businesses and cultural facilities that really do need it. Since March, the state has worked diligently with small business owners to keep their operations open and doing so in a safe manner. But as we all know, small businesses like gyms, restaurants, bars, arts and cultural venues, and event-related businesses such as entertainment venues have continued to struggle to stay open at severe capacity restrictions. This means they face extraordinary difficulties to pay their staffs and rent. While we saw some recovery in the market over the summer, we know that small businesses across Colorado will face new challenges in the coming winter months as they struggle with continuing public health orders and low consumer confidence. Because Congress continues not to act, we are taking action today to provide immediate relief for our small businesses. While we know this is not a magic pill solution, it will provide urgent relief to businesses that sustain our economy in the coming months. To be clear, the bill has four components: about $6.7 million in licensing fee relief for restaurants and bars through DOR and CDPHE, $37 million for direct aid payments to eligible small businesses in eligible counties with severe capacity restrictions, including restaurants, caterers, fitness and recreational sports centers, and movie theaters. $7.5 million for grants to arts and cultural organizations through Colorado Creative Industries, and $4 million for the Minority Business Office Strategic Fund. Through DOLA, we will be able to allocate the money to eligible counties as soon as possible. To be eligible, though, a county or city must be under severe capacity restrictions determined through a public health order by CDPHE, and they must be in compliance with those orders. Eligible industries, again, include restaurant, bars, caterers, movie theaters, fitness, or recreational centers. Again, it is our hope that this bill will provide relief through the coming winter months that will be especially difficult for our small businesses. I ask for an aye vote.
Representative Sandridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to just put this bill into a certain perspective, because there's certain words that have been thrown around. I know if you're in the Finance Committee, you're going to hear the same speech that I said before. A lot of these bills that we're discussing, sometimes I hear people say they're handouts. Sometimes I hear them say they're giveaways. Let me remind everybody that we're looking at the restaurant industry, fitness industry, the gyms, our movie theaters, our art industry. These industries have brought in millions of dollars worth of tax revenue to our state. Millions. So us throwing them a few bucks back is not a handout. We're returning a fraction of what they've given to us through the years. So look at it this way. They brought in substantial tax revenue. We're giving them a little tax refund, a very minimal tax refund to what they've given to us. We all are familiar, because most people in our areas, we do have theaters, we do have restaurants, we do have fitness centers. But I've seen some people discuss the art and cultural aspect. Let's remind everyone, we have one of the top art and cultural industries in the United States. It's a $15.6 billion industry in Colorado. It's 4.5% of our GDP. Any industry, I don't care if they're making milk, cars, or whatever, if you're a 4.5% of our GDP, they're substantial, they make a lot of jobs, they pay for a lot of things in this state. Another concern, as a conservative, and this is something I say, we're picking winners and losers. And we are picking winners and losers here, because we don't have enough money to give to everybody. When you're in a financial crisis, you have to make tough decisions. It would be great to go to every business and say, we're going to give you your 2019 taxes back to help you survive. But that's impossible. We don't have enough money to keep every business going. So we have to make some tough decisions. For every decision we make to help to give a certain industry, there's 10 other industries that are going to miss out. So yes, we are picking winners and losers, but your decision today is tough. Do you pick any winners, or do you just make everybody a loser and not give them anything? Right now, the business owners in your district, the restaurants, the fitness centers, the movie theaters, are looking at you, and they're drowning. And they're not asking for you to prop them up. This bill's not big enough to prop up anything. They're asking for you to return a few of their tax dollars to maybe keep them alive a little bit longer. Mm-hmm. So they've given to us. Maybe it's time to give back a little bit to them. So with that said, I ask for an aye vote.
Representative Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Valdez, and it's an honor to serve with you.
And you, Representative Valdez.
And I want to thank the bill sponsors for Senate Bill 1 for bringing this bill forward, for helping our small businesses, our also arts and cultural organizations, and our minority-owned businesses. But I do have one question, and it's related to agriculture and agricultural events that are happening throughout the state, and I want to make sure that they are also included in this bill. And with that, to the bill sponsors.
Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative, for that question. I want to be clear that if they are an event venue, they do qualify under this bill. And I think it's really important. Arts and culture is not something that only resides in Denver, Colorado. Arts and culture exists throughout the state of Colorado, and it may look very different than what we see here, but agriculture venues that are hosting amazing venues that are a jewel to our state are eligible to apply for this funding.
Representative Valdez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank you to the bill sponsors. Thank you, Representative Harrod, because throughout Colorado we have events, and we need to also make sure that they are covered, and I appreciate that support.
Representative Sandrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify some of the aspects of the bill where I saw some confusion, this is for businesses or in worst case scenario, when we're under, I guess, purple and red. This isn't for the business that's at 50% capacity and barely above water. This is for the business who's been completely shut down or almost completely shut down. Worst of the worst. And I know we can sit back and go, well, why are we shutting down this business? I don't agree with the governor's mandates. That's a conversation. That's over here. We're dealing with this right now. So just to put it in light, worst of the worst situations, you're shut down, you're one of those restaurants that makes all your money from servicing people in-house, that's the one that's going to get the money. Thank you.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the comments by both bill sponsors. This is an attempt, I think, to provide some relief to those that are severely impacted, and I think that's something we can all get behind. But I do think that we can expand upon this, and so with that, I move Amendment L039 and ask it to be displayed.
The amendment has been moved and is properly displayed. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, the meat of this takes place on page 9 and page 12, but essentially what it does is it expands eligibility. And I think it's important that we try to expand eligibility. I know there were conversations I had to the side. Representative Holtor, for instance, we were talking about the need to help out agriculture in rural Colorado, for instance. And I think, if we're looking for ways to expand the relief, then we should. And that's simply all this amendment does, is it doesn't just call out, we're not just providing relief for movie theaters, for instance, or other businesses that are suffering from these severe capacity limits, but we're expanding it to more than just that. And I think it's the only right thing to do, because at the end of the day, I don't want to pick winners and losers. I want to expand it to as many people as possible, and that's why I would ask for a yes vote on this amendment.
Representative Sandrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I completely understand the bill, or the amendment. Only concern I have is we just don't have enough money. So if you spread it so thin amongst everybody, right now it's so little money, it's really going to do very minimal. If you spread it even thinner, will it even have any effect whatsoever? Also, if you go that route, is somebody getting some money? Like right now, with the bill, the most severe cases get the money. Then with this, everybody will get the money, even the ones that aren't really hurting as much. Is it the good use of the taxpayers' money to give $1 to somebody who really doesn't need it and $1 to somebody who really does need it? I'm not against this at all, but I don't know if it's the wisest use. This is a tough decision. We're going to have different amendments of groups that are just as deserving as groups in here, and that's a fact. But can we find a common ground and get a bill passed? That's the concern I have, so just vote your conscience.
Is there further discussion on Amendment 39? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L039. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. Amendment L039 is lost. To the bill, Representative Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And while I do appreciate the bill sponsors bringing this bill, I too agree with my colleague, Representative Williams, on expanding this a little bit. We have agricultural events, not venues, but events in this state that have been shut down, that will not have their events this year, such as the Colorado Farm Show, the Governor's Ag Forum, that I think needs some help too. So with that, I would move Amendment L038 and ask that it be displayed.
L038 has been moved and is displayed. Representative Pelton, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to just add $3 million more to go towards agricultural events for agricultural education. This state, the number one economic driver in this state, if you include the cost of land and all the capital assets, agriculture is the number one industry in this state. And to shut off these venues and these different events is really doing a detriment to agriculture, and we need to have that agricultural education out there. So I'd ask for support for this amendment.
Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually appreciate this amendment. The National Western Stock Show is a jewel for Colorado and for Denver. And this is why I looked into the venue issue, right, to make sure that agriculture events and venues were included in this bill, event venues were included in this bill, and the answer is yes. But I dug a little deeper into the stock show because I was concerned when I heard that they would be going bankrupt if we didn't act today. That's concerning. But I found that they have reserves that take them through September of 2021. They have not started to dig into those reserves. They will start in January of 2021. This bill is to provide immediate relief for businesses that are on the verge of closing. The stock show doesn't apply there. Now, the other ones might. I don't know about those. And so I wanted to make sure that they were included in other provisions of the bill. It looks like they would be. So I don't believe this amendment is appropriate. I don't think that we need to deal with this in this special session. I would like to work with the amendment sponsors, however, and I know we have some commitments from some of the Denver delegation to work to make sure that we don't lose one of our shining jewels, which is the stock show. And so I ask for a respectful no vote on this amendment, but I do want to thank the sponsors for bringing this issue forward.
Representative Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do appreciate the acknowledgement from Representative Herod that there are other events that are affected other than the stock show, because this is not just to help the stock show. Like the Greeley Farm Show is canceled this year, and that is in February. So some of these are very immediate. So I still think this is a great amendment to help address that.
Representative Sandrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I can't disagree with what anybody says. I mean, for God's sake, you feed the state. So you're completely deserving. And if it was a bill where only me had to vote on it, I'd edge and switch things out. But what we have to do is find a certain agreement and a certain common ground where a bill actually passes and some people get something. So, no, I completely agree that you should be added, but it wouldn't evolve into a bill that would be passed and that the governor would sign. So, with that said, I said, again, vote your conscience.
Further discussion on Amendment 38? Seeing none? Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, fellow colleagues. So we all know the importance of agriculture to both the urban and rural parts of Colorado. We all know the importance of these three events, specifically the National Western Stock Show, that has a huge economic impact not only to the state of Colorado and not only to the city and county of Denver, but more specifically to agriculture because of all the components of agriculture that are featured and offered, and this trade and the marketing and mercantile and promotion of all types and classes of animals and livestock in the western part of the United States. Now, Representative Herod made a reference to funding and reserves that take them to September of 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, the next stock show that is scheduled to be held in the state of Colorado will be in January of 2022. I'm a big supporter of funding agriculture and preserving agriculture, not only for the present, but for the future. And so I am very keenly aware of what this amendment is trying to do. And I do support the amendment conceptually. If I can get a guarantee from this body, and I can get a guarantee from the legislators that not only serve in the National Western Stock Show District, but in Denver, and my rural caucus legislators, that we can next year come to an agreement on providing bridge funding for these venues so they can continue, just like we're trying to help many of these businesses, small businesses, so they can continue, so they can hold on for another 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 more months. So when we get the vaccine that is expected to be fast-tracked and available within weeks, if not months, then we can turn this pandemic around. And we can work towards the old normal, not the new normal, because this new normal isn't working for America, and it's not working for Colorado. And it's not working for the business and the economy of Colorado. We can get back to our old normal, and then we can continue to have the Governor's Forum on Agriculture. We can continue to have the National Western Stock Show and the biggest agricultural trade show in the state that they hold in Greeley, Colorado, the Colorado Farm Show. Those things are huge in my district. They're huge to my constituents. They're huge to me. And so I want to get that commitment. I think I have that commitment today in talking with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. So with that, I do support the amendment, but I understand if we can secure the funding outside of this amendment, then we can move forward and we can shorten this debate significantly, and we can take care of those events that are so near and dear to not only myself and my constituents, but also to our urban epicenter here in the city and county of Denver.
Representative Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
It is an honor to serve with you,
I want to come up in full support of this amendment. You know, the National Western Stock Show, and we're talking about all these different venues, but the stock show to this Denver and to Colorado, the metro area and the entire Colorado, it generates around $600 million for this state. And, you know, we're talking, you know, Representative Sandberg spoke earlier about, you know, kind of giving back. The stock show over the years has a long history in this state and in this community in the metro Denver area. And it's been given back to this community for a long time. I think this is a small gesture for us to include this amendment, and I stand in strong support of it. I understand they're not going to run out of money till 2021, I think September, but they've already laid off some 50-some employees. I happen to personally know people that do food service there at the stock show, had about 800 employees. They've laid off about 600 of those in the food service industry. So the stock show is a huge thing, and I stand in strong support of this amendment. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment 38? Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I appreciate what's trying to be done with this piece of legislation, and I do understand. But I'm here to talk about agriculture. I don't necessarily want to talk about just the stock show. There's an organization, Colorado Ag Leadership, that puts together an annual forum. It's been canceled in February. So this is one of those things where it just continues. The small ripples make it all the way to the bank of the pond. I understand. I was down here yesterday and talked about restaurants and needing them in the agriculture business. They buy our products. If we don't have restaurants, we don't have those food service places, then ag's going to suffer. But this is one I think we ought to think about pretty seriously, because the state of Colorado has hung its hat, so to speak, on the stock show for an awful long time. And this isn't a bill, or this isn't an amendment that comes and asks to take money out of what's being asked. It's asking to add money for this ask. I'm not sure how many of you have ever really experienced any of these big shows, but some of the people that I represent, some of the people that live in my district, they make a living off the stock show. Because they give them an opportunity to show their stock. It gives them an opportunity to show how good they are at this and why Colorado is such a leader in the United States as far as agriculture is concerned. The idea that people are going to spend out of their out of reserves and those kind of things, we're already doing that for the state right now. And that's what those reserves are for. I don't think we should be asking companies to spend out of theirs in hopes that things come back to help. We need to do some things right now, and ag is suffering. We don't have enough lobbyists in the ag business, is I think one of our problems. We don't have any. We have to lobby for ourselves. Thank you. But that's one of the problems. Our problems are never really expressed in the press or in the media, but in these small towns, you can tell if ag's helping or if it's hurting. Look at the number of new pickups. Look at the number of new combines. There aren't many out there right now. We're suffering the same problems as every other industry in the state of Colorado. COVID has got us. And here's an opportunity for us to take a look at what ag does to help itself. Ag tries to promote itself, and it does that through the stock show and some of these other things. And like with that Young Ag Leader program, that's a great program. It's brought a number of people into this building that have been through that course. They've become legislators, and they've helped their communities. Let's not cancel those at the expense of just trying to take care of a few specific industries. Thank you.
Representative Liston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I rise in support of Representative Pelton's amendment, and I come to you as a suburban legislator because I know, with my fellow colleagues around that are rural legislators, the tough times that they're going through right now. They can speak more eloquently about it than I can, but I just bring some perspective. Times are tough right now, except when you look at the suburban urban legislators. I speak from Colorado Springs. Our economy is doing reasonably well. We've got Amazon moving in, huge Amazon facility. In fact, it's gargantuan. I, quite frankly, have hardly seen a building as big as this thing is being built. It's going to bring in thousands of jobs. And I know that they're still building here in Denver and the suburbs and so forth. But to the rural legislators, I go back to my story and my theme that I brought to you before. Once again, I recommend it to you, this well-written book by Timothy Egan called The Worst Hard Times. Our good friends in the rural legislature are going through, unfortunately, the worst hard times right now. And they're not asking for a bailout. or, even a handout. They're asking for a hand up. You give us a little and we'll return a lot. That's all they're asking for. You give us just a little and we know how to take care of ourselves, and what little you give us, just like you give us some seed or a little bit of land and a little bit of rain or a little bit of feed, and we'll multiply that multiple times over. We'll grow it, we'll feed it, and we'll sell it. So if the National Western Stock Show and or other events that Representative Pelton and Representative Catlin and others have talked about, if those go down the tubes this year, and the National Western Stock Show, if on normal times, it's less than 45 days out, if I'm not mistaken. It's always in January. And these rural communities of which they represent, they're going to feel a further impact. It's going to be a kick in the teeth. In fact, it may be the death knell for some of the small businesses in these rural communities. So for the city folk, of which there's plenty in this chamber right now, I urge us all to step up to the plate and let's give a hand to our good rural legislators and their constituents. They're asking, if I'm not mistaken, a measly, is it 3 million? I believe it's 3 million. That's a rounding error in this budget. It's a rounding error even in this bill, almost. So let's do the right thing. They're there always for us, with food on the table. It doesn't come just from the stores. It really comes from our rural legislators. So I urge an aye vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion on Amendment 38. Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to respectfully respond to my colleagues who asked for that commitment moving forward to work to ensure that these businesses remain viable. And you have my commitment, as well as I know the commitment of some of my fellow colleagues in the Denver delegation to work with you on this issue. Additionally, I want to acknowledge that, again, these venues and businesses that have been closed due to severe COVID restrictions are eligible under this bill. So I respectfully ask for a no vote on this amendment and a yes vote on the bill.
All right. Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to come down here and tell the body that I too rise in support of this amendment, representing a lot of agriculture out west in Delta and Mesa counties, just kind of echoing what my colleagues have said as well, and encourage a yes vote. Thank you.
Further discussion on Amendment 38. Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment 038. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The noes have it. Amendment L038 is lost. To the bill, Representative Herod.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L047 and ask that it be displayed.
Amendment L047 has been moved.
Thank you.
1 second, we're just waiting for it to get displayed. Representative Herod. And please proceed, Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment specifically deals with the Minority Small Business Fund and does allow for funding. It specifies that funding can be used for technical assistance for the small business, not administrative costs for the department. I ask for an aye vote.
Further discussion on Amendment L047. Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L047. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. L047 is adopted. To the bill, Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L046 and ask that it be displayed.
L046 has been moved. Please proceed, Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment specifically makes sure that we are capturing Colorado nonprofits that are always have been intended to be included in the bill, but we needed to make sure that to include small businesses that exempt from filing a Colorado income tax return. I ask for an aye vote.
Further discussion on Amendment L046? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L046. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. L046 is adopted. To the bill, Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L048.
L048 has been moved and is properly displayed. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an amendment that I think is very important. So if a business, if a county goes into a severe restricted category after we pass this bill, they will be eligible for a portion of the funds because they have gone into more severe restrictions. I ask for an aye vote.
Further discussion on Amendment L048? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L048. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. L048 is adopted. To the bill, Representative... Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was a bad oversight by the Senate. They actually had the wrong appropriation date, so in the wrong fiscal year. I ask for a yes vote.
All right, can you move the...
I move Amendment L054.
Thank you.
Ask for an aye vote.
All right, any further discussion on Amendment L054? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L054. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. L054 is adopted.
Dave, do you have any more?
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I move L040 and ask that it be displayed.
L040 has been moved. Please proceed, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So members, one of the reasons why you're seeing the kind of hardships from businesses and such as restaurants or movie theaters or what have you, the businesses that are laid out in this bill is simply because they're not able to actually provide the services that they're accustomed to doing at the numbers that they are. So what this would do is what this amendment would do is it would allow for these businesses that are eligible within the bill to operate at 100% capacity as long as they implement reasonable measures to limit COVID-19 exposure to their employees and their customers. We can really, try our best here with the limited resources we have to give money to these struggling businesses, or we can open them up. We can help them to actually succeed by letting them do business. So I would ask that there be a yes vote on this, and let businesses do what they do and provide jobs and services to the public. Thank you.
Further discussion on Amendment L040. Representative Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and what a great amendment. The best stimulus we can have, the best thing we can do for these small businesses is let them be open 100%. And as long as they're doing safe practices and being successful, I can't see why this wouldn't be a great amendment to add on to this bill.
Representative Sandrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we've all had conversations about my personal disagreement with some of these mandates, and that is a conversation. But it's a conversation over here, and what we're dealing with now is the bill. Truthfully, if you're 100% open, then you don't get any money. If you're 100% open, then you don't need the money. So it kind of defeats, I'd love to have everything open, but I'm not the governor. If it was up to me, I think it'd be great. But, I think to find a common ground where we actually pass a bill and give people some money, it seems like we have to go down the traditional path of the bill without these amendments. So, I'd love to have all this money go to all industries because they're all deserving. If I was a governor, I'd have different mandates, but I'm not. So just vote your conscience.
Further discussion? Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask for a title ruling.
The committee will stand in a brief recess. The committee will come back to order. Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I withdraw the motion, the request, and I ask for a no vote on the amendment.
Further discussion on Amendment L040? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L040. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. L040 is lost. To the bill, Representative Liston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, members, I did my best, quite frankly, to try and talk Representative Williams from offering his amendment. It was a big overreach. It was a bridge too far to ask for 100%. We know that there are these severe restrictions on the gyms and the restaurants and the other gatherings and stuff. And with all due respect to my good colleague, Representative Williams, I said, please, Representative Williams, don't offer your amendment. It's a little too far. So trying to be the voice of reason that I always am, with that, I would ask that I move L041 and I'd ask that it be displayed.
L041 has been moved and is displayed. Please proceed, Representative Liston.
So, in the name of really just trying to be reasonable, Representative Williams, he just wanted everything. So all we're asking for this are for these same businesses and gyms and movie theaters is 75% of capacity. I saw a piece today on the news this morning of a restaurant in New York City. Maybe you all saw it too. For those of us who watch Fox News, I'm sure nobody on this side saw it, but maybe people on this side saw Fox News about a restaurant owner who was, quite frankly, in contravention to the rules and regulations that New York City had clamped down. He was declaring his restaurant space there's a word for it, I forget, not a neutral zone, but autonomous zone. That's right, an autonomous zone. And he was doing it just to try and make the point that, look, I can come in. Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to talk. Thank you. That look, I know how to run my business. I run it safe. I clean it. I go through all the protocols. And so, that's what this is about, is that I think these business owners, whether they're large or small or whatever, they know how to run their businesses. They're keenly aware of how to take care of their employees and their customers. And they want to be able to not just eke it out here over the next month or two, they too want to be able to make a profit and share their profits with their employees and so forth. So at 75% of capacity, as long as they're doing these reasonable measures, this is a fair and equitable amendment. So with that, I urge an aye vote on L041. Thank you.
Further discussion on L041, Representative Baisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think this is not just a reasonable request. I think it's kind of the only reasonable request. 100% would have been, of course, great. But boy, these businesses, they might survive on a 75% capacity. So we ought to at least give them at every opportunity the ability to just survive. If they're operating at less than that, they're not going to survive. They're going to operate with greater expenses than they have revenues, and it's not going to work for them no matter what the augmentation from government's going to be. It's just not sustainable. They've got to operate at this level. So I think this is a good low level here for them to operate at, and I think this would be a good compromise. Let's let them operate at least where they can survive in these small businesses. We owe them that. So I would urge a yes vote on this amendment.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Representative Liston is absolutely right. This isn't necessarily something that I want to settle on. From the previous amendment, we were at 100. Now we've ratcheted down to 75%. And I think it's completely reasonable to start opening up these businesses or allowing them to open up so that they can actually make a living, produce, and provide for the communities that they're serving. To Representative Sandridge's point, and even Representative Harrod's point, this is not going to solve the problems, right? It's a relief mechanism. It's going to help at the margins. What's really going to solve problems for these struggling businesses is to actually let them conduct their business. Without those paying customers, there's not going to be that kind of economic activity that is required in order for them to sustain themselves. And I'm not sure why we would be against this because it clearly says it within this amendment here that they can increase their capacity as long as they implement reasonable measures to limit COVID exposure. I mean, that's what we should be promoting, right? We want businesses to open back up. We want businesses to be successful, but we want them to do so in a reasonable way where they are protecting not only themselves, but the customers they serve. And if we can't all agree to that, then I think we're going to have a tough time restarting this economy for Colorado because the restrictions are not going to get us ultimately to a place we want to be. So I reluctantly support any attempts to increase capacity from where they are right now. I had hoped that we could have it at 100%, but perhaps 75% is a more reasonable number for the majority. Do it for the struggling restaurateur. Do it for the business owner who is trying to figure out how he's going to pay his employees or take care of his family or their family. It's the only decent thing to do. So please open up this economy, allow for capacity to be increased, and let people earn a living.
Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I admire my colleagues' consistency, I'm going to have to ask for a no vote on this amendment. Thank you.
With that, is there any further discussion on L041? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L041. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. L041 is lost. To the bill, Representative Liston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we tried at 75, so we're trying to find the sweet spot here, and I don't know exactly where it is, but we're willing to work for it. you know, it's really the kind of the same argument, whether it's going to be, obviously it can't be 100, and it's not going to be 75, and it, you know, 25 is laying out there already. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would move L056 and ask that it be displayed.
L056 has been moved and is properly displayed. To your amendment, Representative Liston.
So, you know, after conferring with my colleagues, you know, they said, well, Larry, Representative Liston, go to 74. And I said, well, no, let's try 73 or 70. So we compromised, you know, and, you know, I'm all for compromise. You know, I'd rather get, I'll take half a loaf, or really this would be 0.73% of a loaf, than 75. So, you know, this is 73%. And let's see what happens here. You know, we can dicker. I'm willing to throw in a little extras. You know, I know we can't bribe anybody. We're not trying to do that. But 73% is what I'm shooting for right now on behalf of the small businesses. I'm sure these small businesses would take 73 in a heartbeat. Thank you. I ask for an aye vote.
Representative Sandrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we all know, I'm a staunch conservative, staunch free market capitalist, deregulation. Will I vote for an amendment that shuts down 27% of the economy? That's socialism. The government shouldn't come down at 27 and shut down 27%. A full free market is 100%. Let's have the government put their thumb on 27% of our businesses and shut them down. I ask for a no vote.
Further discussion on L056. Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L056. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. L056 is lost. To the bill, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly appreciate Representative Sandridge's passion for Austrian free market economics. I share them, and I couldn't agree more. If the government is shutting down any portion of the economy, it's something that is something we shouldn't tolerate, and we should work to end. But as it stands right now, the reality right now is that there is a shutdown happening, and I want to try and alleviate some of that pain that is being caused by the government. So with that, I move L042 and I ask it to be displayed.
L042 has been moved and is displayed. Please proceed, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, this is going to be my last amendment on this bill, just so you're aware. But originally we started out at 100%, then we went to 75%, then we tried to work with the majority and went to 73%. Thank you, Representative Liston. And now, since that doesn't seem to be working with the majority, I figured, okay, how about 50%? I mean, that is literally half a loaf. And I would ask that the majority find it in their heart to allow a business owner to at least service half the customers that they would normally service. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. Right now, we have restrictions in place that are putting business owners and employees in the poorhouse. And if we're ever going to get them off to be successful again, then let's help them do what they were doing successfully prior to these restrictions. Let them serve the customers. Let them serve their communities, let them earn a living, and provide a wonderful thing for their communities. Please vote yes.
Further discussion on L042. Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L042. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. L042 is lost. To the bill. Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Sandrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And truthfully, I respect everybody's amendments. You know, if it was up to me, I'd open up everything. You know, I'm still going to be the guy that goes around and eats at the restaurants, and maybe a lawyer will go with me, eat at the restaurants that are violating them, but I'm not the governor. So, you know, I don't make those decisions. What I'm trying to do here is try to get a few bucks for some businesses in my district so they can stay afloat a little bit. That's what I'm trying to do. It's not the best bill in the world, but gosh, I guarantee some of our constituents are looking at this and could use a few bucks right now when they're about drowning. Another thing I'm going to throw out there. We're here to make some tough decisions right now. And I think we need to try to put away some of this political nonsense. Like I said, I want to get some money for my businesses. I could care less if Governor Polis is signing it, and everybody should care less if Representative Harrod's on the bill or Representative Sandridge is on the bill. We need to get some money back to our people, and that's why I'm here. And if Governor Polis is willing to sign off on it, I love it. More power to him. So let's support our businesses. They're all watching you. Let's give them a little money back. I ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Representative Harrod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I do also ask for an aye vote on this bill. I want to be clear. I have received emails, text messages, and even in-person conversations with small businesses who are saying, go back, do your job, and get us some relief. Unfortunately, businesses have closed before we've come back to act. But what we can do is ensure that more businesses do not close. Our businesses are hurting. Our economy is hurting. I believe that's something that we all actually agree on. We have the ability to do something to bridge the gap right now. It's not going to be a lot. It's not going to be enough, but it will be something. And maybe that something will keep them compliant with their lease. Let them pay their lease payments. Let them pay their employees for 1 more month, for 2 more months to get them through. That is what we're trying to do here. And then we come back in January and we continue to do the work of rebuilding Colorado's economy strong. Our businesses are suffering. Our minority-owned businesses are suffering. Our cultural industries are suffering. We have the ability to do something right now to get them until we come back in January and until Congress can act. I asked for an aye vote on this bill. I do think actually it is important, not to negate what my colleague said, but I do think it's important that Representative Sandridge and I, from different sides of the aisle, different cities, different parts of Colorado, are coming together to say this is important. Because quite frankly, it is. It is of great consequence to the state of Colorado. And if we leave here without providing the support to small businesses, we will have not done our jobs. I ask for an aye vote.
Further discussion on Senate Bill 1. Representative Williams.
Thank you, members, and to the bill sponsors, I want to thank you for bringing this. You know, Representative Sandridge said, you know, we're going to have to make tough decisions, and this is certainly a tough decision for me. I happen to agree a lot with Representative Sandridge's economic politics. And then I think in an ideal world, we would be doing everything we can to empower businesses to operate in the way that they're accustomed to operating. We would allow for them to be successful and do so in a way that doesn't encumber them or their ability to service the customers of the communities that they live in and operate in. But here we are. You know, at the end of the day, as legislators, all we get to really have a choice in is either yes or no. And that's after we've reviewed the policy that has been put before us. You know, I am not sure where I'm going to come down on this. You know, there's arguments I think that are valid, you know, from an economic standpoint, why we should be voting no, but there's very real arguments to vote for this. You know, I said this earlier in another bill where I wanted to err on the side of helping people out, especially in these tough times, given the pandemic that we're experiencing, given the restrictions and limitations that the governor and the government has put into place. And this is why it's a bit of a struggle for me, and I felt it necessary to at least come here and explain to the body as well as my constituents who are watching and who are paying attention where I'm at. Ultimately, we're going to have our third reading vote tomorrow on this, and I want to make sure that before whatever final decisions I make that I really grapple with what we're doing here, because it is a balancing act. And I just want to express to everyone here, especially to my colleagues in the minority, there's 24 of us who we obviously have a different view on how we should be governing, but we're still running into the reality of this pandemic and the restrictions that have put into place, and how do we wrestle with that? How do we balance our values with trying to do right by our constituencies and by the public? And I haven't come to that answer on this bill yet. If you asked me this morning, I was going to say I was going to vote no. You ask me right now, I'm leaning yes. I mean, that's how on the fence I am with this, and I know that doesn't normally happen with everyone. I think, it doesn't normally happen with me. I usually know where I'm going. But on this particular one, I understand what the bill sponsors are trying to do. I understand what this body is trying to do. But at the end of the day, I also don't want to encourage more of what we're doing, and that's, I think, ultimately the problem I have with this bill, is that this is a Band-Aid in my mind that's going over a gaping wound. And yeah, it will help, but will it also have the unintended consequence of encouraging further restrictions? We come here and we pass a law, and we think we're doing something great, we pat ourselves on the back, but then we don't understand that maybe 6 months down the road, we would have been better off fighting to open up, the economy, rather than trying to hand out these crumbs or these little pieces of relief to businesses that may not exist 6 months down the road. So, with that, members, all I can say is I'm going to try and vote my conscience as best I can into the 24 of us that are in this caucus. I'm not sure where to go on this one. Again, tonight, I want to vote yes on it, but that might be a different story, and I know at least 23 others of you are feeling the same way. So good luck with that, and vote your conscience.
Further discussion, Representative Sandrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I can't disagree with anything Representative Williams said. This is a tough decision. We're throwing Band-Aids around on major wounds. But that's why we're here, is to make some tough decisions. I want to put something into perspective, too, in case everybody didn't read the bill. Your local county commissioners decide what businesses get the money, because the local counties know best. So right now, your county commissioners have the possibility to help fund some of these businesses in your counties. If the bill dies, you don't get the money. If the bill dies, your counties won't get the money. And people who are drowning right now could care less about political points, could care less who's on the bills, could care less who's signing the bill. They're looking for some money, and they're looking for their counties to help out and their state reps to help out. I think what my dad used to say, trying to prove a point won't buy you a loaf of bread. And these people are struggling to buy a loaf of bread. So I think we should really consider voting yes on this. Thank you.
Further discussion on Senate Bill 1, Representative Champion.
I am completely conflicted on this one. We listened to this in the Finance Committee, and we just can't seem to understand, if you're doing everything right, should you be penalized? Well, I'm not really sure. I just don't quite understand why we should do what, especially with these amendments that we've gone through, we're trying to support those parties that have done it right, that are doing the right thing, and they're following all of the COVID restrictions. Yet we still can't seem to get that through this August body. So again, I am conflicted as to which way I'm going to vote on this particular issue. I guess my conscience will be my guide.
Further discussion on Senate Bill 1? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 1. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is passed. Representative Gonzalez Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to proceed out of order for consideration of Senate Bill 2.
You've heard the motion. Seeing no objection, we will proceed out of order to Senate Bill 2. Mr. Gregorio, please read the title to Senate Bill 2.
Senate Bill 20B-002 by Senators Gonzalez and Holbert, also Representatives Exum and Tipper, concerning temporary assistance for individuals who are facing a financial hardship due to the COVID-19 pandemic and in connection therewith, creating the Emergency Direct Assistance Grant Program and transferring money to the Emergency Direct Assistance Grant Program Fund and to the Housing Development Grant Fund and the Eviction Legal Defense Fund for this assistance.
Representative Exum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move House Bill 002 and the Public Health and Human Services Report and the Appropriations Report.
To the Appropriations Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Appropriation Report, we had a drafting error that was corrected in Section 13-40, that's 12770. It talked about the legal defense or the Eviction Legal Defense Fund from the CARES Act money that expires in December 2020. And so we had to change that for this bill and substitute the section which established the state treasury for the Eviction Defense Legal Fund, and ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on the Appropriations Report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Appropriations Report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The Appropriations Report is adopted. To the Public Health Care and Human Services Report.
Ask for an aye vote on the Public Health Care and Human Services Report.
Representative Tipper, is there any further discussion on the Public Health Care and Human Services Report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the report of Public Health Care and Human Services. All those in favor?
Before we do that, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I actually need to move an amendment to the Public Health Care and Human Services Report.
All right. Want to move that amendment, Representative Tipper?
I do. It's Amendment L009. I ask that it be displayed.
All right, L009 has been moved. Thank you. Please proceed, Representative Tipper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This just clarifies that the monies for the unemployment insurance fund, the federal match, will only go into place so long as there's a federal match. And I ask for an aye vote on the amendment.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L009 to the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L009. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. L009 is adopted. To the committee report, Representative
Thank you,
Tipper.
Mr. Chair. Now I ask for an aye vote on the Public Health Care and Human Services Committee report as amended.
Is there any further discussion on the committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Public Health Care and Human Services report. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. To the bill, Representative Tipper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is $54 million in support for landlords, homeowners, and renters, and I ask for a yes vote on SB 2 as amended.
Any further discussion on Senate Bill 2? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 2. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Senate Bill 2 is passed. Mr. Gregorio, please read the title to Senate Bill 3.
Senate Bill 20B-003 by Senator Fields and Crowder, also Representatives Duran and Landgraf, concerning assistance for individuals who are unable to pay their energy utility bills and in connection therewith transferring money from the general fund to the Energy Outreach Colorado Low Income Energy Assistance Fund.
Representative Landgraf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 003.
Members, hold on one second, Representative Landgraf. Could I have quiet in the chamber, please? Please proceed, Representative Landgraf.
I move Senate Bill 003 and ask for a yes vote. I don't believe there's a committee report.
All right. Is there Representative Duran?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate Bill 3, I'm really happy to bring to you. It's a bill that addresses the utility costs Coloradans have faced and struggled to pay during the pandemic. COVID-19 has impacted all of us, but many of Colorado's most vulnerable workers have been hit hardest. More Coloradans have lost their jobs or have had hours cut or have been unable to find work. They have also seen their utility costs increase as they spend more time at home under stay-at-home orders, work from home, and students learn remotely. These costs will only increase as cold weather arrives. The CARES Act money was allocated for utilities through House Bill 1412, but those funds expire on December 4th. This bill will direct an additional $5 million in general funds to Energy Outreach Colorado. The funds must be used by June 30th, 2021, is a one-time allocation and will target income-qualified customers impacted by COVID. I ask for a yes vote. But, Mr. Chair, I also would like to move Amendment L003 and have it displayed, please.
Amendment L003 is moved. Please proceed, Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, this amendment is just clarifying the language which helps protect consumer data. It's about the privacy of all Colorado citizens in the time of need. So as we all support transparency and audits, we also support and know the importance of consumer protection. And I ask for a yes vote.
Further discussion on Amendment L003? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L003. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. L003 is adopted. To the bill, is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 3? Representative Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to ask, just for the sake of discussion before the body here, can the, if the bill sponsors would just sort of address a little bit for us, where the money normally comes from for the Energy Outreach Colorado Low Income Energy Assistance Fund, how much usually comes in, and from where, from what sources, and why we are we expecting to be $5 million short? And well, I also see that in the bill, if that's not all spent, it gets returned next year. But are the normal mechanisms for that funding still going to be pursued? And why? I guess really, why is there a clear and kind of compelling need for $5 million to go into this right now? So, thank you.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for those great questions. I just want to add that we did address those for you in committee, so I ask for a yes vote on this bill. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion on Senate Bill 3? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Senate Bill 3. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Senate Bill 3 is passed. Representative Gonzalez-Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the committee rise and report.
The committee will rise and report.
remotely is that even when you eat leftovers at the house, they're better than they are in the house.
Representative Wilson, the House is going to come back to order. Mr. Gregorio, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Madam Speaker, your Committee of the Whole begs leave to report it is under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 20B001 as amended, Senate Bill 20B002 as amended, Senate Bill 20B003 as amended, Senate Bill 20B004 passed on second reading in order revised and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Representative Valdez, A. That's close enough. You all have heard the motion. There are amendments at the desk. Mr. Gregorio, please. Oh, Representative Larson. Let's do it when we actually get to. Yeah. Hold off just a second. Mr. Gregorio, please read the Williams amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Representative Williams moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken by the committee and not adopting the following Williams Amendment L003 to Senate Bill 20B004 to show that said amendment passed and that Senate Bill 20B004 as amended passed.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the first Williams Amendment to the Committee of the Whole.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we debated this bill at length. I don't want to belabor it, but what this would do is it would allow for churches not to have any further restrictions on their ability to gather and worship as they see fit. I think it's important that we protect our First Amendment as it relates to religious freedom. It's one of the bedrock principles of our country. And I don't think this is a tough vote, or it shouldn't be. So I'd ask that the majority of this body vote to protect churches and to protect worshipers and let them practice their God-given rights that are enshrined in the First Amendment to our Constitution.
Representative McCluskey. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And while this is certainly a moment for all of us to find our spiritual path and our faith, this does not belong in Senate Bill 004, which is focused on a transfer of funds in response to the public health crisis. I urge a no vote.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of the Williams Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Gregorio, please open the machine and members, please vote. Representative Melton, how do you vote?
No.
Melton votes no. Hooton?
No.
Hooton votes no. Jackson?
No.
Jackson votes no. Sirota?
No.
Sirota votes no. Buckner?
No.
Buckner votes no. Esgar?
No.
Esgar votes no. Froelich?
No.
Froelich votes no. Kraftharp?
Oh.
Kraftharp votes no. Daphna Michelson-Janae?
No.
Michelson-Janae votes no. Tatone?
No.
Tatone votes no. Wilson?
Yes.
Wilson votes yes. I can't even tell who that is. McLaughlin?
No.
McLaughlin votes no. Cutter, that's who that is. I couldn't tell. It's
No.
Cutter votes no. Let's see. Carver, Landgraf. Is Landgraf up there?
Yes. Yes.
Landgraf votes yes. Gray. No. Gray votes no. Jaquez Lewis.
No.
Jaquez Lewis votes no. Rich.
Yes.
Rich votes yes. Carver. Buckner. Is Buckner there? Buckner.
No.
Buckner votes no. Is Carver? Carver is excused. Please close the machine. With 25 aye votes, 39 no votes, and 1 excused, the Williams Amendment is lost. That brings us to the second Williams Amendment. Mr. Gregorio, please read that.
Representative Williams moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken by the committee and not adopting the following Williams Amendment L004 to Senate Bill 20B004 to show that said amendment passed and that Senate Bill 20B004 as amended passed.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the second Williams Amendment to the Committee of the Whole report.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is an attempt to reclaim, I think, a little bit of our power as it relates to appropriating money in the purse strings. We debated at length on why this is important, so I won't belabor the point, but the main goal of this is to make sure that when any financial decisions are about to occur, especially when new federal funds are going to be coming into the state, presumably in January or early next year, that we have a say in how that money is spent. That's the only appropriate way to do it. At least that's how it's been set up in our government. So I would encourage this body not to look at this as a Republican or a Democrat issue, but a legislative versus executive branch issue. So please vote yes.
Representative McCluskey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I urge a no vote.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the second Williams Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Gregorio, please open the machine and members please vote. Representative Michelson-Janae, how do you vote?
No.
Michelson-Janae votes no. Buckner.
No.
Buckner votes no. Sirota.
No.
Sirota votes no. Cutter.
No.
Cutter votes no. Landgraf.
Yeah, no.
Landgraf votes no. Crafthart.
That was the correct vote, Representative Landgraf.
Okay. No. Crafthart.
No.
Crafthart votes no. Melton.
No.
Melton votes no. Hooton.
No.
Hooton votes no. Tatone.
No.
Tatone votes no. Jackson.
No.
Jackson votes no. Wilson.
Yes.
Wilson votes yes. McLaughlin.
No.
McLaughlin votes no. Rich.
Yes.
Rich votes yes. Esgar.
No.
Esgar votes no. Gray. What is that? No. Gray votes no. Carver is excused. Is she back yet? Oh, there she is. Okay. Carver. Humphrey, please vote. Jaquez Lewis.
No.
Jaquez Lewis votes no. Froelich.
No.
Froelich votes no.
Madam Speaker?
Oh, yes.
I see on the board I'm a yes, but I voted no.
Can't see it.
Okay. Thanks for catching that. And Humphrey, is he? Representative Humphrey? Representative Humphrey, you have the honor of having the first fine of the special extraordinary session. That's $3. Please close the machine. With 24 aye votes, 41 no votes, the second Williams Amendment is lost. Mr. Gregorio, please read the third Williams Amendment.
Representative Williams moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken by the committee and not adopting the following Williams Amendment L040 to Senate Bill 20B001 to show that said amendment passed and that Senate Bill 20B001 as amended passed.
Representative Williams,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the third Williams Amendment to the Committee of the Whole report.
please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, members, what this bill, or what this amendment would do to this bill is it would increase capacity for those businesses that are affected and eligible as defined in the bill, and it would increase it to 100% as long as those eligible small businesses implemented reasonable measures to limit COVID. The reason I'm trying to do this is because ultimately, if these businesses are going to come back from the brink, they're only going to be able to do that if they're actually able to conduct business and serve the communities that they operate in. Without that, many of these businesses are they're gonna go away. Workers are going to become permanently unemployed, and we're going to have a bigger mess if we don't allow them to actually operate. So, with that, I would ask for a yes vote on this.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'm going to come down here
I'm going to take a 21C on SB 1001. I don't feel like there really, frankly, is a conflict of interest, but given that I have residual financial interest in 2 of the coffee shops that I owned prior to this, and I can honestly say I've not discussed with my partners whether or not they would intend on seeking this aid, but in an abundance of caution, I don't want to give the appearance, should they choose, because they have managerial control over the shops at this point, should they choose to seek relief under this bill, I do not want to have the appearance of financial impropriety. So I will be taking a 21C on everything related to Senate Bill 001. Thank you.
Representative Larson will be marked excused for purposes of 21C in votes involving Senate Bill 001. Is there any further discussion on the Williams amendment? Seeing none, Mr. Gregorio, please open the machine and members, please vote. Representative Esgar, how do you vote?
No.
Esgar votes no. Rich?
Yes.
Rich is yes. McLaughlin? McLaughlin is no. Jackson?
No.
Jackson is no. Wilson?
Yes.
Wilson is yes. Titone?
Yes.
Titone is yes. Hooton?
No.
Hooton is no. Melton?
No.
Melton is no. Hawkes Lewis?
No.
Hawkes Lewis is no. Kraftharp?
No.
Kraftharp is no. Sirota?
No.
Sirota's no. Cutter?
Yes.
Cutter is yes. Michelson Janae?
No.
Michelson Janae is no. Buckner?
No.
Buckner is no. Gray? Gray is no. Froelich?
No.
Froelich is no. Representatives Exum and I missed Landgraf.
Yes.
Landgraf is yes, and
Madam
Michael's
Speaker?
Representative McLaughlin.
Yes, may I change my vote to a yes, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Where are you? Okay, McLaughlin is yes. Please close the machine. With 30 aye votes, 34 no votes, and 1 excuse, the Williams amendment is lost. Mr. Gregorio, please read the last Williams amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Representative Williams moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken by the committee and not adopting the following Williams Amendment L042 to Senate Bill 20B001 to show that said amendment passed and that Senate Bill 20B001 as amended passed.
Representative Williams,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the last Williams Amendment to the Committee of the Whole report.
please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So members, this is more or less the same thing, just with a reduced capacity. And as you can see on the screen here, it's at 50% capacity. So 100% might have been a little too much for the majority. I grant you that, but let's see if we can get to something here. Because at the end of the day, if these businesses cannot actually operate, they're never going to be able to come back, and we're going to be in a worse off problem. Please vote yes for these business owners, but more importantly, vote yes for the employees and the workers that depend on that livelihood. If you vote no on this, then I'm not sure what else they're going to be able to do other than rely on limited unemployment relief or potentially have to move to another state where they're going to be able to find and make a living. So please vote yes on this.
Is there any further? Representative Singh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise in support of this amendment. And we've heard from a lot of business owners that if they are making the agreement, if they are choosing to be eligible, they're choosing to do certain things to keep their customers safe and can prove to do so, 50% will keep them going. This will be much more effective, the most effective measure we can possibly do for our restaurants and for gyms and for other things that are seriously looking at closing their doors within 30 days. The intent of the bill is very noble, but it won't be enough for a lot of these businesses. This alone would probably save a lot of our Colorado businesses. So again, urge a yes vote.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the last Williams Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Gregorio, please open the machine, and members, please vote. Representative Froelich, how do you vote?
No.
Froelich votes no. Buckner? No. Buckner votes no. Michelson Janae. No. Michelson Janae votes no. Sirota. No. Sirota votes no. Cutter.
Yes.
Cutter votes yes. Crafthart. No. Crafthart votes no. Melton.
No.
Melton votes no. Hooton.
No.
Hooton votes no. Tatone.
Yes.
Tatone votes yes. Jackson.
No.
Jackson votes no. Wilson. Wilson.
Yes.
Wilson votes yes. Landgraf.
Yes.
Landgraf votes yes. McLaughlin.
Heck yes.
McLaughlin votes heck yes. Rich.
Yes.
Rich votes yes. Esgar.
No.
Esgar votes no. Exum. Jaquez Lewis.
No.
Jaquez Lewis votes no. Please close the machine. With 31 aye votes, 33 no votes, and 1 excused, the last Williams amendment is lost. Mr. Gregorio, please read the Liston amendment.
Representative Liston moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken by the committee in not adopting the following listed amendment, L041 to Senate Bill 20B001, to show that said amendment passed and that Senate Bill 20B001 is amended passed.
Representative Liston.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, members, we almost have it right. I've been following the vote. We're at 100% to allow the businesses open. We just voted at 50%. We're almost there. And this amendment is, and to my colleagues over there, hello, everybody, this is at 75%. So really, this is the sweet spot in all candor. Let me tell you why you should vote for this amendment at 75%. The business owners, as I said when I was speaking about the original amendment, they really know what to do. Their future depends upon it, not only for themselves, but for their good employees, because that's really what they're in it for, is to take care of their employees. Another thing that has not really been brought out in all of this discussion, and I would remind all of my colleagues, is that the COVID vaccines, which have been in the news, there are 3 major companies, Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca, that have vaccines that are been proven with 90+% efficacy. I repeat, 90% plus efficacy, and they are ready to go and distribute it within days. In fact, I'm surprised that the FDA has not approved it already. And it's estimated that when they do approve it, sometime, if not this week, but next week, they will get at least 20 million vaccines out to the public before year end. 20 million, and over 100 million by the end of the first quarter. So at 75%, these businesses will be able to thrive and grow and prosper here in that first quarter. So think about it. We're only days away. It's going to be major, major news, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, that when these vaccines hit the market, which they will, that it's going to dramatically help these businesses. So let's let them operate at 75%. I ask for an aye vote on the Liston amendment. Thank you very much.
Representative Gray.
Thank you, members. I just want to briefly talk about the standards for a 21C and whether you need to take one. I'm also a member of a private LLC that works, and I have no idea if they'll apply for any of this program or not. But I want to make it clear that there's nothing about the standards. We can have conversations offline with anyone who wants to, but there's nothing unethical about being a member of an LLC or being a business owner, a partial or full business owner, and voting on this legislation. And we can have OLS come in talk about that. But I want to make sure that part of it is clear. a complete or partial business owner, I don't believe under 21C there's any reason that you need to take a 21C, and there's no reason to question the ethics of anybody who votes on this measure based on 21C.
Representative Mullica.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And unfortunately, I'm going to be a no on this amendment, but I do want to come up here and really thank Representative Liston for being able to state the importance of vaccines and what they mean to our society. And I just want to thank you and recognize that, Representative Liston. Thank you very much for pointing that out tonight.
Is there any further discussion on things relevant to this bill? Okay. Seeing none, Mr. Gregorio, please open the machine and members please vote. Representative, let's see, Kraftharp, how do you vote? Oh, Kraftharp is no. Melton?
No.
Melton is no. Hooton?
No.
Hooton is no. Titone?
Yes.
Titone is yes. Sirota?
No.
Sirota is no. Cutter?
Yes.
Cutter is yes. I'm not sure who that is on the bottom. Froelich?
No.
Froelich is no. Buckner?
No.
Buckner is no. Michelson Janae?
No.
Michelson Janae is no. Esgar?
No.
Esgar is no. Rich?
Yes.
Rich is yes. Jaquez Lewis?
No.
Jaquez Lewis is no. Jackson? Jackson is no. Wilson?
Yes.
Wilson is yes. Let's see. McLaughlin?
Yes.
McLaughlin is yes. Rich?
I already said yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should look a little closer. Landgraf?
Yes.
Landgraf is yes, and then me, sorry. Please close the machine. With 29 aye votes, 35 no votes, and 1 excused, the listed amendment is lost. I see that it says up there, Assistant Chief Clerk Becker, and I thought someone was playing a joke on me. But it's actually Matt Becker. Okay, please read the Pelton amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Representative Pelton moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken in the committee and not adopting the following Pelton Amendment L038 to Senate Bill 20B001 to show that said amendment passed and that Senate Bill 20B001 is amended passed.
Representative Pelton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I move the Pelton Amendment to the Committee of the Whole.
Please proceed.
Thank you. This is just to add $3 million to this bill to help the ag venues continue their education. So that's what it is.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Sandridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to come up here and just reiterate how important the ag culture is to our state. I'm fully in support of giving them even more money if we had the money. One thing I do want to stress is in the original bill, we did come a long way in helping these rural counties and having them apply for the money. So they can, even if this amendment doesn't pass, we did some work for the smaller counties, and they will be able to apply for the funds just like any other county. So they'll get their share of this small pie as well. So vote your conscience. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before us is the Pelton Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Gregorio, please open the machine and members please vote. Let's see. Representative Michelson Janae, how do you vote?
No.
Michelson Janae votes no. Buckner?
No.
Buckner votes no. Sirota?
No.
Sirota votes no. Hooton?
No.
Hooton votes no. Jackson?
No.
Jackson votes no. Esgar?
Yes.
Escar votes yes. Rich.
Yes.
Rich votes yes. Wilson.
Yes.
Wilson votes yes. Melton.
No.
Melton votes no. Cutter.
No.
Cutter votes no. Froelich.
No.
Froelich votes no. Landgraf.
Yes.
Landgraf votes yes. Kraftharp.
No.
Kraftharp votes no. Hawkes Lewis.
No.
Hawkes Lewis votes no. McLaughlin.
Yes.
McLaughlin votes yes. Gray. Gray votes no. Tatone.
Yes.
Tatone votes yes. Van Winkle. Please close the machine. With 31 aye votes, 33 no votes, and 1 excused, the Pelton Amendment is lost. That brings us back to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Gregorio, please open the machine, and members, please vote. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Tatone votes yes. Escar.
Yes.
Escar votes yes. Jackson.
Yes.
Jackson votes yes. Hooton.
Yes.
Hooton votes yes. Sirota.
Yes.
Sirota votes yes. Buckner.
Yes.
Buckner votes yes. McLaughlin.
Yes.
McLaughlin votes yes. Kraftharp.
Yes.
Kraftharp votes yes. Landgraf.
Yes.
Landgraf votes yes. Froelich.
Yes.
Froelich votes yes. Cutter.
Yes.
Cutter votes yes. Melton.
Yes.
Melton votes yes. Wilson.
Yes.
Wilson votes yes. Rich.
No.
Rich votes no. Gray. Gray votes yes. Hawkes Lewis.
Yes.
Hawkes Lewis votes yes. Michelson Janae.
Yes.
Michelson Janae votes yes. Please close the machine. With 43 aye votes, 21 no votes, and 1 excused, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. That brings us to announcements and introductions. Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of the Public Healthcare and Human Services Committee, thank you for your service. Members of the Joint Technology Committee, thank you for your continued service, because we will see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. in Senate Committee Room 357. So this is your first heads up if you're a member of the Joint Technology Committee. We'll be talking about the sales and use tax simplification system for those of you who want to see how our small businesses can operate more efficiently and make sure that government works for them. Please feel free to log in or see us in Senate Community Room 357, 1 o'clock.
Representative Van Winkle, do you have an announcement?
No, Madam Speaker, but be still my beating heart. The tax simplification system is something that is great and wonderful and should be celebrated by all. So I look forward to that, Representative. Thank you.
Any other announcements or introductions? Mr. Tallest future Speaker of the House.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do want to recognize Representative Kraft-Thorpe and all of her work with Representative Van Winkle on that sales tax simplification process. Members, we will in a second adjourn tonight, and we'll come back for third reading tomorrow. And then we will introduce the resolution tomorrow to CNADA, the first extraordinary session of the 72nd General Assembly. So that's what's to expect. What time? Should we start at 10? Why don't we plan on coming in at 10 a.m. tomorrow? Does that work for everybody? So I move that the House stand in adjournment.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
What?
Oh, the COVID testing.
We'll figure that out.
Do you want to do 9:30? No, okay. I'm sorry.
We'll figure, Representative Kipp brought up a great point, which is the COVID testing time slots that have been arranged, so we can hopefully rearrange those, maybe just bump those up in an equivalent amount of time. If not, then maybe come in and then the Senate's actually having free breakfast burritos. I don't know if anyone saw that on Twitter. They're paid for through fines that were put in the jar, but we in the House use our fine money to pay for the staff to have a party at the end of the year. It seems much more appropriate than having the Senate eat the burritos. So thank you to all of our staff for all their hard work. And maybe, we can arrange to bring in some burritos if we can't move those times around. So we'll plan on coming in at 10 a.m. So with that, Madam Speaker, I move that the House stay in adjournment until Wednesday, December 2nd at 10 a.m.
One more example of how the House is superior than the Senate. But seeing no objection, the House will be in adjournment till tomorrow, Wednesday, December 2nd at 10 a.m.